I'm going to have to do some audio introduction so that people understand what we're doing a little bit.
Do we understand what we're doing?
No, well, that'll help us too, because realistically, it'll be good for them to hear, but then good for us to figure out what we're doing. We're glad that you could join us for our first inaugural podcast called And Also, a podcast for the rest of the week. In it, Kirk, Steigler, and I are going to be dialoguing about the previous week's message, and we want to just kind of bring another voice into the room. So if you listen to the previous week's message at Faith Alliance Church, if you haven't, you can catch it at faithall.org. They're all there for you, but last week's message is there, and you can watch that or listen to it, and then dial into this podcast for about 15 minutes. And in it, we're just going to be talking about further implications of peace, having a conversation rather than a monologue, being able to hear another perspective. And it's a great perspective this morning as we get started and learn how to create this podcast regarding peace for this week and peace for the following podcast. But then as we look into the scripture passages later on in this year, we'll be uncovering those to have a deeper dialogue, not only with one another, but we want to invite you into the process to think deeply and well about our culture and think deeply and well about the scripture. So we hope you enjoy. I'm here with virtually with my friend Kirk, and we're just going to kind of evolve in person, figure out how exactly we're going to talk about this passage in this last week's message. So, Kirk, thanks for doing this. I'm glad you can take the time to do this. And
thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, in this inaugural episode that sounds so wonderfully formal, we started this series last week just called Peace. And the idea is just to look at the biblical idea of peace, starting last week with an overview of peace in the Old Testament, peace in the New Testament, and then going forward, looking into peace with God, self, and others. So as we're looking kind of at last week and just spending a few minutes having a conversation about it, and as you were in your home and I was in the building, so we haven't had a chance to discuss it since then, which is kind of the fun part of the spontaneity of it all. What are you thinking about? You've had a couple days. What jumped out at you? What's surprise, challenge, of course?
A lot. So there's a lot, which is good since we are chatting about stuff. There's a lot. So we just came through Christmas Advent season, right? Everyone talks about peace at Christmas, the world coming to peace, peaceful times, right? Silent night. What a peaceful night it must have been when, poor woman trying to give birth in a stable, right? With shepherds running over the place because, I'm sure their sheep were compliant and didn't try to eat the hay that baby Jesus was lying on, etc., right? So, yeah, the peace. Peace in the world. Could there have been peace at that time? In that moment, and then since there was no video last week, other than the offertory little signage, there was only that one screenshot that was up the entire time for those of us who were at home. That just simply said peace, and it had the image that was chosen was perfect. Because it kind of showed the difference between peace and tranquility. So people cross over that concept, I think, of between peace and tranquility a lot. Like peace should be everything is calm, but I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think peace is like a perspective. It's a viewpoint where tranquility is everything is calm. So the image that was up on the screen last week, if anyone saw it and remembers, it was what appeared to be some sort of lake. And the water was very calm, steam rising out of the water, right? A misty morning kind of a look. However, if you look closely, there's a fence that goes through some of that. So at some point recently, that was a field that flooded. So there was a lot of activity. There was some chaos that occurred right before that moment. that took over a space. And it could also be, I mean, in the background, we couldn't quite tell, but in the background, there's like a straight line and then it just chops off. So we weren't sure if that was some sort of levee that broke and flooded the field. But, there was a lot of chaos moments before what we now look at as peace, the example of peace. So I think peace is an interesting idea to start looking at because peace is where you find it, right? So a beautiful example of being at peace, right? It's a place that we can go to. We often say when someone passes away, well, at least they're at peace, right? It's like some sort of rest stop. But the most beautiful example of that, I think, is when the disciples are on the Sea of Galilee trying to cross, and Jesus is with them in the boat, but sound asleep. Jesus is at peace. He is peaceful, right? Meanwhile, the disciples are panicking and flailing and freaking out because, I mean, these are guys who are out on boats on a regular basis. These are fishermen. And they're like, we are going to die. This is bad. This storm that's kicked up is terrible. And we are going to die. But the master's sound asleep, as they put it, right? So, and they wake him up. He's like, huh? Oh, no, hang on. Be still. And then everything calms down and off they go. And he's back to peace, right? It's an interesting idea, I think, peace versus that tranquility there. And it was nice that you were showing how it's viewed, Old Testament, New Testament, the shalom idea. I love that that's a greeting and a farewell. Something you bestow on another person is the peace. Like it's same in Arabic too, right? Salam, right? Same thing. Like you want to bestow this gift of being okay with everything. I don't know if it's exactly that. It's more than that, but that things are well for you and that you are, you feel good. I don't know if that's it either. It's bigger than that.
Do you think people like that? I think that that's that word tranquility. I think I didn't think about that. I think that's a really good word to kind of contrast peace with, in a way, because I mean they're similar, but I think biblically speaking, what you're pointing to is that it's actually a contrast. That tranquility and peace are not the same. There's actually, but do you think that tranquility is what people are wanting as a like they think that that's what they're desiring, but really they want the completeness, the wholeness of shalom or arene of actual peace? Do you think they're kind of stopping short of just trying to be satisfied with just tranquility?
Tranquility's boring. Tranquility is lovely. The last year has been a little chaotic, to put it mildly. 2020 was a little nuts for future people who hear this recording, but you need a moment of tranquility to kind of reset, to level set, right? That moment that Jesus stilled the waters, right? Those waters in us are kind of kicked up, and everybody needs that moment of whoa, okay, settle down, and then peace, right? So peace is, I think, acknowledging and accepting all that's occurring, and not being troubled by it. Right? So Jesus wasn't troubled by the storm. He spoke to it and said, "These guys are freaking out. Calm down." Right? He said it much nicer than that. Someone wrote it down, but it's interesting. Yeah, tranquility, I think, is a very different feeling, and people look at it as a blissful state, but it's not much is happening in your life when things are tranquil, right?
Whereas peace, life, what's happening?
In peace, at peace, life is going on, and you're good with it, I think.
Yeah. So then, would you say that peace is, because here's what's great about the kind of the spontaneity of this conversation, which feels like, by the way, for kind of exposition, for context, this kind of feels like what you and I have been doing for the past few years after service.
Yeah.
You come up, you're like, hey, well, I was singing about blah 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 blah, and then I have this moment of like, I have to like this pause where I'm like, yeah, yeah, I haven't thought of it that way. So I love it because all this stuff it's even new to me, even though I've wrestled with the idea of peace the last few weeks. It's still this is fresh. It's great. So would you say then peace is there's an honesty about peace, so peace kind of looks at the situation and say, I mean, if you take Jesus in the boat, that's great. He looks at the situation, assesses it for what it is. It's not that Jesus was dismissing the fact that there's a storm going on. He's like, no, there's a storm going on, but Jesus had the ability to speak to the wind and the waves and calm it. But it sounds like peace is just really honest. Like here, I'm not, whereas I wonder if the attempt to find tranquility, just to kind of keep going with that idea, is almost kind of trying to dismiss maybe the reality of life. Like, okay, well, none of this is really happening. I don't want to pay attention to it, so I'm just going to try and find a tranquil spot. Versus peace, where it's like, no, all of this stuff is happening. It's incredibly disruptive, but I'm okay with it. Like, or like there's an where I'm assessing the reality of the life, reality of what's going on in life, and God's given me peace, and I'm fine. Is there an honesty that comes with peace?
I mean, we've seen examples of that in other people's lives around us, right? People who are struggling with, heavy duty doctor's diagnoses on their lives, or people who've been through traumatic events, and they're at peace with it, right? Again, peace as a place, right? They're at peace with it. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of that picture that was up for Sunday service, like really made me think about the difference between peace and tranquility there, and how interesting that is. And even when you think about in the Psalms, right, where David is talking about running for his life, right? He's hiding from Saul, right? Even at those stressful moments, he can turn to God and be at peace for that time, where he knows he can trust that God will take care of it all. So yeah, I think it is being okay with the reality around the chaos that could be around you. It's very interesting. Especially everyone's been at home for a really long time now. A lot of people doing yoga online, and are they seeking? It's good to stay flexible and strong, but are you seeking the bliss of tranquility? Because no one's found it, as everyone's videos have shown, that their kids are running through and the dog is walking over them, and cats climbing on them while they're trying to do it. It's a moment of peacefulness. You can find peacefulness doing something like that, or is it tranquility that you're seeking? And I don't think it's the tranquility. I think it's peace. And I think that's awesome that's where you decided to take this journey this time through. Peace. It's active. It's an active acceptance.
Yeah, that's it. That's an interesting idea. Maybe we'll kind of land on that for today, because I agree. I think the more I've kind of looked into the idea of peace, it's weird because we kind of glibly throw the idea of peace around all the time, right? We just this, and I think, but I think it's a much bigger idea, like you said, and I think it has larger, far-reaching applications in our lives to actually live at peace. I think is a big deal. So we kind of throw it around glibly, but yet we don't really know what it means to. At least my understanding, my feeling is that we don't really know what it means to live at peace. That's hard to access sometimes. We wish it was like a rest stop. Like, okay, at least I know where to go. I'm searching in all these places, and I can't yet find it. So I'm really interested in that idea of like, okay, God offers it, so it's eternally accessible to us. we still search for it in other places, and maybe we're searching for tranquility, but that we kind of it's this huge kind of divine, eternal idea that we kind of treat, like a piece of candy or something. Um, yeah, I think kind of trying to chase down the application of it, and I guess it's good that we have 3 weeks left, so we'll do this again in 2 weeks to kind of follow up on this and see what else pops up. But I think even understanding that there's a difference between sometimes what we're chasing, the dismissal of tranquility, or trying to find a moment of tranquility, trying to dismiss the rest of the world, but realizing, try, like, in your mind, you have this, the a yoga session is going to be perfect, no one's going to interrupt me, but then the reality of life is that everyone's interrupting me, everything's, and how do you have peace in those more realistic moments, rather than just trying to find a moment of tranquility. So yeah, I don't know, I think just kind of, if anything, not bringing even today's inaugural podcast, to a close, but almost kind of widening the gap and saying, okay, hey, there's really more to discover here. Good. Well, I think that'll do. So as an exit to this first podcast. Thanks, Kirk, for doing this. We'll keep doing this every other week, just as a means of kind of getting started and getting some momentum to it. But we'll learn as we go. This was really encouraging and refreshing to me, is just to even kind of dialogue a little bit about the previous week's message. And so thanks for doing this and trying this out with me. And we'll continue doing it. We'll continue with it and figure out how to move forward. So thanks.
You are most welcome, and thanks for dragging me into this. This is great.
My pleasure. Like I said, you're the guy. You're the guy.
Well, I hope both of our listeners enjoy this, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Good. Me too.